Hey, everybody. My name is Ryan Shear. Sitting across from me is David Millsap. David is the host of In the Box here on Lebanon. Now we're going to do kind of a reverse In the Box, as he's going to sit in the chair and I'm going to interview him. David's a very interesting person to me. We didn't know each other too well before we started this. And through the travels, he was our sheriff. That's how I kind of came to know you, our sheriff. But when you look in, you've been a coach, you've been a juvenile officer, you're very involved in your church, you're very involved in your community. And through your retirement, you've become kind of this media-free agent. You're calling for Jacket Nation Sports. You're on KTTK. You're doing stuff for here at Lebanon now. So that's kind of how we met. Is kind of getting involved in that, and we'll get into that. But we're just going to do the David Millsap story today, because Googling you was fun because it's all your law enforcement stuff and a little bit of coaching stuff. So it kind of forced me to go out and ask some people about you, and nobody ever said anything bad. But one of the funniest...
Really, you didn't talk to the right people, though.
You were a sheriff and law enforcement. There was a couple bad things. It just kind of depended on how many face tattoos they had. But anyway, but you've been involved in your community. You've been involved in your church. You've been involved in sports. So let's just start from the beginning. And you're from here, correct?
Well, my parents moved here in 1965. My dad's from Wright County in the Wolf Creek area, if you know that, in between Hartville and Mansfield. My mom's from Seymour, from Tiggs Creek, and I grew up on Tiggs Creek philosophy from my mother. But they moved here in 1965 when my dad took a job with Tasty Bread. He later moved to Colonial Bread. And, yeah, so we grew up here from the time that I was about 5 years old, and lived here all my life.
5-year-old Millsap in my brain is not much different from you now.
Well, that's probably
just a smaller version.
That may be true in a lot of ways. I'm sure my wife Tammy would think that the 5-year-old pops out quite often. But Ron Wallstrom had something to say to me one time. Ron Wallstrom was the editor of the Lebanon Daily Record for a long time newspaper man here. And when I got involved early in politics back in the 1980s, I ran for school board, and he told me, he said, "You are too boring to be in politics." And so that, I looked at that today and I go, I wish we had more boring people sometimes in politics.
Yeah, it's we may get into that in a little bit. So there was two big veins when I researched you that I seen. One was sports. Well, three really. One was sports, one was broadcasting, and one was law enforcement. Just pick one of those and tell me how you got into that, because I want to go through all three, because that's almost an odd combination.
Well, it is an odd combination. I used to tell people I double majored in college in broadcasting and film and criminal justice, and I sound really good on the police radio when I talk. But I think a lot of it comes down to I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie. I like the excitement of law enforcement. I like the excitement as a sportscaster and drawing that picture, and that's the only artistic vein that I have, is that ability to tell a story during a ball game. And then on the coaching side, I just had this love for sports, especially baseball, and there's an adrenaline to that, is in competition. So I think if you look at it, why did I get into all three of those? Because I think I enjoy the excitement of all of that.
The one I wanted to ask more about is law enforcement, right? Because in my journeys in life, there's two reasons people get in law enforcement. One, you're a law and order guy, or two, to serve your community. And you may start out one way and end up another. So I want to start with law enforcement. What attracted you? Because you said you double majored, so you had that desire to invest time in it, even in college. What was it that kept you in law enforcement, other than the adrenaline?
Well, I think that service part of that, I think I get that from my parents. My dad was working for Colonial Bread. I remember somebody that owned a little country store one time told me, "Your dad was the best bread man we ever had." And that kind of went to that idea of providing good service to somebody. I think my mom instilled into me this idea of fairness, and that everybody should be treated fairly. And I've always kind of lived by that, especially supervising people. I don't treat people equally. I treat them fairly, because every person needs something a little bit different. That's the same thing out on a call on the street a lot of times. So I think that is kind of what drove me toward law enforcement. I do like, I am a law and order guy. I really developed a sense. I think the Springfield Police Department helped develop this of more of you have to involve yourself in the community, because at the time that I was at Springfield PD, that was really an emphasis. All 22 years I was there. And then I think the dedication to the community is instilled by the fact that I've been given so much opportunity here, and I think my wife Tammy probably deserves some of that credit, because she told me when I took the job at Springfield PD in 1994, she goes, "You can work anywhere you want, but we're not moving, and so commute wherever you want to commute to." And her family's ingrained in this community as well. So I think that's where you get a lot of that is, the excitement of all that. And then the people that influence you want to make you part of the community, wants to make you serve.
When you were in Springfield, take me through your law enforcement career in Springfield, because did it start in Springfield or did it start here in Trent?
Well, it actually started here in 1983. Just by luck, I was sitting in a criminal justice class at Central Missouri State. A guy comes in and goes, "Hey, we're going to have a paid internship with the 26th Circuit Court's juvenile division." Nobody had paid internships back then. Mm-hmm. So I got the job to work at the detention center when it very first opened in Camden County. They paid me. I got 6 hours of college credit. A few months later, I get a call from Mike Ward, who was the court administrator, and Steve Dorn, who was the chief juvenile officer, and they asked me, "Would you be interested in being a juvenile officer?" I didn't even really understand even what that meant, other than they told me what it paid, which was a lot more than I thought I was going to be able to make as working as a deputy sheriff someplace or even a entry-level police officer. So I took the job, but I told him, I said, "I got 6 months left on my criminal justice degree. I've got my broadcasting degrees done, but I'm getting the second part of that degree." And they said, "Listen, we have a hard time keeping this position filled. Would you come to work the summer, take a leave of absence, and then come back the day you graduate?" And so I got really lucky. And life's all about opportunity and luck and taking advantage of that. So January 1st of 1980, or June 1st, 1983, I became the juvenile officer in Laclede County. And I got Laclede County. I was supposed to go to Morgan County, but the guy in Laclede County hated the place. And he was going to go back to it. It was driving him back to Alaska. and they said, and that was part of it. They said, "We can't keep anybody in Lebanon." And so I came here in 83 and stayed until January of 94 when I went to Springfield.
So in that time, is it awkward for you now when you see those people in that era that you were their juvenile officer, and you might have had to crack down on them, arrest them, do whatever, and then a lot of people do change their lives, and then you interact with them later on. Was that ever awkward for you?
No, not really, and some interesting things about that. And I was really hardcore, and I was tough on kids back then. And juvenile officers back then had a lot more power and was given a lot more leeway in how they dealt with things. And I used that detention center at Camden a lot for kids here in Laclede County. But I've had people stop me at Walmart, and I remember a mother coming up to me and she goes, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She gets out her wallet, she shows me a picture of her son, who was a Marine at the time, and says, "I just want you to know that when you slammed that cell door on him at Camden, that turned his life around." I was out running one day, back when I used to run all the time, and a guy pulled up to me on a motorcycle and stops, and he goes, "Hey, are you David Millsap?" And I thought, well, I'm going to buy it right here. And I go, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, I just want to tell you that you were really hard on me when I was a kid, and how much that has meant to me and how I've been able to turn my life around." So there's a lot of these people that I see out, and unfortunately they'll come up to me, and we're talking now some 40 years ago, and come to, "What, do you remember me?" And I go, "No." And then they'll tell me their name, and they'll go, "I was really bad." And I'm thinking, "You weren't that bad, because I don't remember you." And we all have this idea that we were a lot worse maybe than we were, but it's not really awkward. And there's people in the community that are now very successful that I dealt with when they were young. And, and some of that was just really petty little things. They got caught in possession of some alcohol, or they got caught back in the day loitering on consumers' parking lot.
Yes.
And they'd get a ticket for that. And, and I'd been really hard. I might have been hard on them, made them go pick up trash or something like that. But, I don't. I think that, as you said, people grow up, and certainly when I'm dealing with them when they're 15, 16 years old, most of them are going to come out of whatever issue that they have.
Yeah. So as you transfer to Springfield, did you go to Springfield as a juvenile officer or as a what when you transferred, what did you go?
Yeah, so during the time that I was the deputy juvenile officer here, I was also a reserve deputy sheriff. And I really liked true hardcore law enforcement. And I kept the job as juvenile officer because it let me do a couple of things. You got to present cases in court like you were an attorney. So I really learned the law a lot, how to question people. There was a lot of things that you could learn. But the real true job that I enjoyed was the true hardcore law enforcement stuff. So a lot of people don't remember this. I had an unsuccessful bid for sheriff in 1991. I ran it was either 91 or 92. I was like 31 years old. Ran for sheriff, was one of the first people ever to not get elected with more than 5,000 votes. The Democrats swept everything, including this was Bill Clinton time, and they swept the state house and won some local offices, and I lost that race and won the Republican primary, lost in November, decided that I needed to make a career change and go do something that I really wanted to do, and so decided to go to Springfield and got a job with the Springfield Police Department. And, it's interesting. Two people told me not to run for sheriff when I was 31, my dad and Richard Wrinkle, who later became sheriff. And he says, it's just not your time. And I've used that speech now to people who want to run for political office, especially when they're young. But what a blessing it was that I got beat.
Right. Because it led to you doing all of these things that rounded you out for when you became sheriff.
Yeah. So if I got elected at 31, we've never had a 4-term sheriff in Laclede County. So let's say I've done 3 terms and I'm in my early 40s, and where am I going to get a job at?
Right.
And so, I was a much better sheriff because of the 22 years I spent in Springfield. So that was truly a blessing that I got to go up there and work up there.
So what was the difference in going from Lebanon to Springfield? Completely different atmosphere, completely different places, especially back in the mid-90s when you would have went.
Yeah, totally different. So I go to Springfield. First thing is that they had their own academy. It was a 6-month-long academy. I'd already been certified as a police officer and went through what they used to call the old 120 hours training, which is like 3 weeks of training to be a police officer. So you went through 6 months of training. Very professional department. I can't speak highly enough about that agency, how they train, how they put money into people, how they're committed to ethics. And so it was just a different atmosphere. And plus the fact that Springfield's not West Central LA, but it's busy.
Oh, yeah.
And I drove what they called Beat 21 when I came out of the academy. And after I did my field training, and that was the west end of Springfield, which was one of the busiest areas. And I'd get in the car for second shift and go in service, and they'd come on the radio and say, if your number was 221, you have 20 calls holding your beat, stand by for the first call. And after that, before you got out of the parking lot, they had a higher priority call they'd send you to. And it was just call after call after call, which in turn, you really learn the job well because you're handling such a high volume of calls.
And in that era, it was a different time in police work too, because you're having the change because you have the OJ case, you have all of these things, DNA is becoming more prevalent. Police work is just rapidly changing in that era. So as you're in Springfield, you eventually become an investigator, correct?
I became a head of investigations. It was kind of an odd deal. I got promoted to lieutenant. I spent most of my time in patrol, and as a patrol supervisor, I was in community policing. In 1997, I was the PIO for about a year and a half, where I handled all the public information stuff in the media. Got promoted to lieutenant and took over special investigations, which narcotics and gangs, and led that, and then got transferred over to head criminal investigations. And I did that for about 7 years. So I was the head of detectives there.
So you worked on some pretty high profile cases. One of which was the 3 missing women, which mean you've talked about privately. What is it like to be on that national level of a case?
Well, so my involvement in somewhat is overexposed, I think, by some people. I was involved in that case starting in 2011. So not in the beginning. In fact, it happened a year and a half before I got to the Springfield Police Department. But I got a call from the chief one afternoon, and he said that we have an opportunity to redo this case, take it to Washington, D.C., put it in front of about 20 experts in the area of homicide and cold cases. It took us about 2 years to get all that put together to do that. And so my part of that was being in charge of or command of a team of investigators that put the case back together. And when we talk about that case, there were 25,000 police reports, many of them handwritten, and they had not been truly cataloged, and some of the leads had not been followed up on. So that team put all that together, took it out to Washington, D.C., and then presented that case. So that was my involvement in that. It wasn't in the beginning, but like every Springfield police officer since that happened, you get dispatched to a call where somebody had an idea, a thought, or they knew something, and you'd have to write one of those reports.
Right. And why I bring that up, because you had told me that, and I wanted to clarify that, because when you search you and the 3 missing women together, some stuff come up, and that's a huge rabbit hole on the internet now. It's one of the it's nationally one of the most unsolved popular cases. There's tons of podcasts and tons of things about it. I've always joked that I want you to come sit in here and talk about it, and I just want to touch on it for a minute. But outside of while you're doing investigations, I'm a big fan of not true crime, but reality true crime. Like, do you ever watch on A&E the First 48?
I have.
So how accurate is that? Because I know from being a producer and filming things, a lot of times those producers have editorial control. We're trying to get clicks and likes and people to watch. So when you're looking at those sort of shows like the First 48, those documentary type true crime things, how accurate are they?
Well, they're accurate, but they cut out a lot of the slow stuff that you don't see, like sitting at a computer writing a report. One of the last homicide cases I worked here, I think my report was 22 pages long. Well, they're not going to sit over your shoulder, and I'm deciding whether or not to use a comma someplace. But so it's probably not as exciting sometimes as people think. I want to go back to the 3 missing women's case, and you talked about how that's nationally known, and there's been so many documentaries on it. John Douglas wrote a book one time. He was an FBI profiler who called the Cases That Haunt Us. That case haunts the Springfield Police Department.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
And I will tell you, as a street sergeant, when we'd have a missing person or a missing child, as we set up to work that from the patrol level, I used to tell my guys working for me, don't let this be our 3 missing persons case. Let's make sure we're doing everything right in the very beginning, because the ending is dictated by the beginning. And that was one of the issues at the 3 missing women's case. But it's, investigations are a lot of fun. It's tedious, hard work. In the Haley Owens case, for instance, when she was kidnapped off the streets, the team that I was in command of at the time, I was a captain. I remember I was up for 33 straight hours. Yeah. And many of those investigators were up much longer than that. So investigations is really hard. You have to be really dedicated to the job, but in the end, that may have been the best time of my career.
Is there any of those investigations that stick with you and keep you up at night? Because you're seeing some pretty brutal things in those investigations.
I wouldn't say that for whatever my personality is, it doesn't keep me up at night, but there are cases. There was a death of a child in Springfield that I know was a homicide. We never could prove it. That case is one of those it's hard to get over. We have an open homicide case here in Laclede County that when I was sheriff, the only open homicide case that we have of a Kansas City drug dealer that came down here, probably was killed in Pulaski County, but the body was dumped in Laclede County and burned. We have ideas, but no evidence. And so those cases are really tough, especially when it deals with the death of somebody.
How often does that happen that you have as an investigator, that's the person that did it, but you don't have the judicial evidence to proceed? How often does that really happen?
Not very often. Most of the time you're able to prove the case, especially violent crime. I think nationally, 88% of all violent crime is solved because you either have some type of physical evidence, or if it's not a death, you know who assaulted you, or that type of stuff. So, but those cases where you know they did it and you're just one little piece away gets very frustrating.
But not real common.
But not common.
Okay. So as you wrap up your career in Springfield, 22 years, you said?
Yes.
And when you came back to Lebanon, did you come back did you come back running as sheriff, or did you serve on the sheriff's department for a while?
No, I came back with the idea. I had people approach me about running for sheriff. They wanted a real change here, and I was at a point in my career that I could retire and be in good financial state, which I always tell young people, be looking at that retirement program because it comes quicker than you think. And I had a lot of people approach me, and finally I decided in November of 2015 that I was going to run for sheriff. We announced it right about a week after I retired in January of 2016, and I spent that year running for sheriff. And, I tell people running for political office, stole this line from Sandy Crawford, that running for political office is not for sissies. And, 12, 14, 15-hour days, running for office for almost 9 months.
So you ran in 91.
Uh-huh.
And then again in 2000.
In 2016 that I ran and took office 2017.
How different were those two campaigns?
Unbelievably different, because I'd learned so much. I'd matured so much. I understood that how to get a team around me to help me with things, give me advice, give me direction. When you run, I ran unsuccessful in 91. Part of it was age, I think, at age 31. I would have been the second youngest sheriff, I think, ever elected in Laclede County. I ran against a guy that had been a long-time police officer. He was a first-term sheriff when I ran against him, which is really tough to beat anyway, though I ended up in 2016 beating a one-term sheriff. But just the process and how to conduct a political race, because that's what it is. It was night and day on how to do it.
So as sheriff being an elected position, different from, let's say, a police chief or a sergeant or somebody that, the government is paying to do that work. How does that affect your day-to-day job, that it's an elected position, not a hire fire position?
You can make hard decisions and not worry about having to please anybody. And especially in the situation that I was in, because of the retirement that I had from Springfield Police Department, I didn't have to worry about any of the political pressure of trying to keep my job, right? So you get elected, let's say, and I see this all the time, people in their 30s get elected to an office like sheriff, and then they've got to play some of those political games to try to stay elected, which is horrible, especially in that position. So I was in a position where I could look at Ryan Shear, who's wanting me to do something, who's telling me, I gave money to your campaign, or I really went out and supported you, had a sign in the yard, and I'd just look at you and say, thank you, but this is how this is going to work.
Yeah.
And so that was a big help. And by the way, everybody thinks that once you get elected sheriff that people are going to be on your doorstep all the time trying to ask for favors. That rarely happens. And in fact, I'll be honest with you, I can't think of anybody from 2017 till I left office that was calling me saying, can I get a favor about something? So that just doesn't happen, even those people that may donate to your campaign. Most of the people that donate to a campaign donate because they believe in you.
Yes. And
they just want you to do a good job. And that's what was so great about serving this community is I kind of knew what they wanted because they told me when I was campaigning. And we accomplished those goals.
What is your favorite thing you accomplished at your time as sheriff?
Changing the culture at the sheriff's office. We took a group of people. Here's the best story to tell you. So after I win the election in August, got to go through the November election, even though I didn't have an opponent. So as soon as that was official, I started meeting with the staff that was there at the time. And I'll never forget, I was meeting with a patrol group, and I asked him, I said, how do you share intelligence information with each other? Because they were set up with like 4 patrol groups. And one of them says, well, we don't share with the other guys. And I said, well, why aren't you sharing that information about who's doing this and all that? Because we don't trust them. And so I knew right then the culture of the sheriff's office had to change. And, you know, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But we changed the culture of the way they thought about serving the public, the way they went about doing their job professionally. I'm not saying they didn't make mistakes or I didn't make mistakes, but overall, when they came to the sheriff's office, they knew that there was going to be a standard and they were going to be held to that standard.
So moving on from sheriff, let's go back to broadcast.
Okay,
because we kind of covered that, not as in depth as I wanted to, but you know, we got time to go back into that stuff. But on the broadcasting side, so when you're in college, you do film broadcasting, those things, but you go into law enforcement. But you were on KJL quite a bit.
I was.
You did find time to split off and to be broadcasting as well. So take me through that journey of how you split law enforcement and broadcasting. Yeah,
so it started a long time ago. So my favorite show growing up as a child was the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. If that doesn't sound dorkish, my second favorite show was the NBC Game of the Week with Kirk Dowdy. So I'm always
not familiar with that one.
Yes, I've always had this love for broadcasting. And so in high school, I was part of a radio show called Jacket Journal on KLWT, and that really kind of spurred that. Ann Compton, then her name was Ann Dryden, was our drama teacher, and so I really got into the broadcasting thing and did some football games. I was playing football for Lebanon, got hurt at Parkview. Ed Sisson put me on KJL in 1977 as a 16-year-old. I don't know what he was thinking, but I did a couple of ball games with him. Later, I did some games before I went to college with KLWT Radio with Gene Clay, who's an icon of local broadcasting. He built all 3 radio stations here in Lebanon. And went to college. My job in college, I worked at KCMW, and I worked for a couple other radio stations, Kelly X out of Lexington, doing basketball, football, and baseball games. And then I had to do the board shift, as you know what that's like. And I would do 18-hour board shifts sometimes on weekends, from sign on to sign off. And so broadcasting was always just a part of that. So when I came back home to take the job as juvenile officer, I got a part-time job at KJL doing ball games, and I was there for 38 years, longest part-time employee they've ever had.
And that had to be a true love, because while you're doing your police work, you're committed to this for almost 40 years of going out, being an officer, seeing the day-to-day destruction, doing that, and then immediately putting on a different hat, sitting down at a radio console. And so that... I've always wondered which one was your true lifetime love.
Law enforcement, but I got to tell you, it's almost equal. And one of the things that coaching and broadcasting has done for me is it kept me from getting burned out on law enforcement. I see all these cops, sometimes they get burned out because they have no other outlets in life. And so I was able to take the broadcasting and turn it into, and you're right, well, to give you an idea, I would get off work here in Lebanon when I was a juvenile officer, let's say at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would drive to Lawton, Oklahoma to do a college basketball game. And
Lawton's not a short drive.
No, and be back here to go to work the next morning. And so I didn't sleep a lot in the 80s, but I had that true love for broadcasting and the art of sportscasting. I think a lot of people say, well, you're a sports nut. Well, kinda. But I like the art of sportscasting better than I do the sport.
No, and I get that because you see that a lot. I know he's kind of polarizing, but growing up with the Cardinals, loved Jack Buck, right? He knew how to do it. His son, not so much. Right? I don't know how you feel about him, but when and you see that shift in broadcasting too, is that as more competition, they start doing more things to collect more viewers. And that art kind of gets lost. I remember growing up with my dad listening to Cardinal games and stuff like that. You really had a feel for it. And I don't feel like the new announcers exactly have that art that you're talking about. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I respect the sports thing. I'm so ADHD, I couldn't do it, right? I'm like, oh, they have a ball, and tomorrow, it wouldn't work for me. So you really have to pay attention. And I imagine as many games as you've called, you kind of almost become... You have this intuition of what's coming next because you only see the same thing so many times of knowing what's coming next. So that's really got to help you in that broadcasting moment doing sports.
Yeah, I mean, you got to know the game.
Yes.
And so you're right. And there are no secrets in the game. And so I can kind of get an idea when a team's going to bunt. So I can say that on the air. I kind of get an idea of what play they're going to run in football because of the down and distance. So you can prepare yourself for that. But really what I enjoy is painting that picture. And, I would have people stop me, as I used to tell Kevin Stubblefield, my old broadcast partner, this is my last year.
Yeah.
Well, I did that about 15 years in a row because somebody would stop me out in public and go, listen, we can't go to the games, but we love to listen to you and Kevin.
Yeah.
And as soon as they'd say, we love to listen to you and Kevin, and it's just like being at the game. And I could just see the game in my mind when you're describing it. Then I'd go back to Kevin and go, okay, I'm good for another year. There's that ego thing.
Right.
But, your wife likes to paint. My wife likes to build things, and she's very mechanical. I am not that. My artistic side is being able to use words to paint a picture and tell a story.
So I have to tell you this story. So how me and David here kind of got hooked up with Lebanon Now is I was doing some promos for the library. Right. And I'd met you, just a real quick side trip. Lebanon Now was supposed to be everybody working together. We had this big meeting. It just kind of didn't work out that way. And I remember seeing you there as sheriff, as Lebanon Now was getting started. I interviewed you a couple times for the 911 center. We didn't really know each other that well. So you came in and we sat down, and Casey Pitt's interview. At the time we were trying to find some people to interview for Lebanon Now, and you wanted to do the Casey Pitts interview, and Casey wouldn't be on camera. I said, if you can convince her to be on camera, and we got that set up. And I remember sitting there watching that interview with her and just dealing with you in that. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I went home, honestly, and we can call her in here now and tell her, I told Sarah, I'm like, we found Lebanon Now's Walter Cronkite. It was, I remember Walter Cronkite. I'm a big news hound. I loved watching that. I hated to see the fall of Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw and stuff, because those are people I grew up with. We're a little generationally different. And their journalism integrity kind of went away after a while. He left with his fully intact. And just as a compliment, us working together has improved a lot of the ways that I think about this, because I want to make sure that we have integrity here and we do things here. And that leads me to my next thing is that you're very devout in your faith. You're very devout in your religion. And through all the things that you go through of what you see as a cop, and you see the worst of humanity and whatever, what keeps you drawing back to that and using that as that cornerstone?
Yeah, I don't know how people without faith are able to function, to be honest with you, in the trials and tribulations of everyday life. And my faith helps me with that, and to understand. Willie Nelson wrote a song one time when he was a Sunday school teacher in Dallas, Texas in the 1950s. And it's basically, who are you to ask me why?
Yeah.
And that God is explaining stuff to him, and who are you to ask that? I think the study of the Bible allows you to understand your faith and to understand that there are things that you will never understand, and it's not meant for you to understand. And so that's how you handle the tragic things that you see every day. My faith has been a big part of me, and that is a development. I've been teaching Sunday school for a long time now, and that having to sit down, study that lesson, to be able to present that lesson has really helped me develop my faith. It's interesting you use the word, you're very religious, or you're religious. I'm not religious. I'm a Christian, and there's a difference to me. And I think Tammy, my wife, has helped me with that. There's she's a worker bee, and there's a lot of things that I draw from her, but her idea of faith and family and the things that she brings to the table in our family, we would not be able to function based on David Millsap. So, the faith is just a huge part of who I am now.
So as you get to retirement, and as I joked that you're becoming this media free agent, and you're seeming to be able to find places to fit in as an old radio guy, because I was in radio for a couple years, right? How are you seeing what we call new media? Because Lebanon Now would be part of that,
right?
New media. How are you looking at radio, newspaper? Because you worked at the newspaper for
I did
too, and do all that, and how we go into new media, and kind of the death of the old media into the new media, or the evolution, however you want to call it. I wrote the question down to ask you how you feel about that, experiencing all of it, because from broadcasting in the 70s all the way up to now, where you're calling for Jacket Nation, which is new media, I'm new media, you're finding a home there. What is that, watching that like?
It's odd, because my first job, I didn't go to college right out of high school. I got a job. I was working as a petroleum exchange engineer at a gas station. I was pumping gas. And Ron Wallstrom called me and said he'd heard me doing some broadcasting stuff and some public address announcing, and knew I was involved in sports. And he goes, would you come write a story about Kerry Speaker, who I went to high school with, was a state champion in golf, now Kerry North, member of the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, or Golf Hall of Fame in Missouri. Would you write a story about her? So I wrote a story. And I could always write. When I first started, I couldn't spell cat if you spotted me at the CNT. So he gave me a job at the newspaper, and I was doing sports, and then I got to do news. And back then, the Daily Record was such a force in this community.
Oh yeah.
And if you wrote for that was a huge deal. They had a reporting staff of there were probably 5 of us in the newsroom at that time. The heyday of KJL, they became kind of the news source in the late 80s and 90s, and up until they dismantled things. I see this evolution, and it's just odd to me, because the newspaper, God bless them for everything they've done in this community, but now they're down to 1 day a week, and how long will that last? Local radio, KTTK still exists, and they have a very specific audience. They've been very kind to me. I do a morning show there. I also do some sports for them. So they've got an audience there. KJL made the decision that they were going to get out of basically local broadcasting. I think they got one guy now that does a little bit. It's just so different, and you have to change. And now when I go do ball games on the radio for KTTK, and I'm also doing games for KFLW out of Waynesville, I don't know how many times I show up and a radio station's got a camera that's doing the game. And Jacket Nation is a big production, and they were kind enough to let me do some games with Kevin this past fall. But even small radio stations now hook up a camera to the mixer, and they're streaming the game. So at some point, if you're not streaming, you're not making it.
Well, and this is our new podcast studio. I want to say this is the first interview in this new pod. It's not done yet. We're pretty close. But I knew you were coming in. I wanted to do this in I'll throw it back to radio. And yet we have cameras. Like, we have 3 cameras set up, and we'll have cameras mounted in here. One of the big things when you go on YouTube, streaming, whatever, is you see this setup a lot of people sitting around doing a podcast, but without that visual element. People want that. You see a fall off. You see that. And in the way that I grew up, like I said, listening to Cardinals games. I was a touring stand-up comedian for a few years in entertainment, started doing YouTube videos, podcasting, then got the marketing bug, just like that's what I love to do, and got that and combined it all into this. And it's odd to me, because you're right. Not that there's not contention between the media here in town, but you watch and you see something that you idolize, like KJL and the paper struggle, and knowing that you're part of that, right? But on the other side of it, I always feel like what Lebanon Now is adding and what new media in this town is adding, Jack Nation included, all the things, is we had the void where we didn't have that information, and local information, what the paper was doing, what the radio was doing. It's kind of what I consider kindergarten, right? We go through public school, so everybody exists on kind of the same information. And I feel that's what those agencies did. They gave us what was going on in town, what was going on in city council, what was going on here, and what was going on other places. And then we could all go to one central place, whether that be the paper, the radio, or whatever. And now that's Facebook or Twitter or social media. And it's definitely different. And I'm glad you found a home in it.
Yeah, I am too, and you know, it's been a lot of fun. In the Box has been a lot of fun for me to do because I'm able to talk to people, and people ask me about that show, and I'll say it's just a conversation. Yeah, I'm just having a conversation with people that I find interesting or have an interesting story to tell, and I enjoy bringing that out. From people, and but you know, this day and age, and you know, my kids are in their late 30s and early 40s now. They are visual. Yeah. And Dad's sitting there describing them something in word form on the radio without a picture. They're not as interested in that. Probably not interested in listening to Dad talk. They've heard enough of that.
Isn't that fun though?
But it is, you know, at some point, I mean, your coverage of local sports is going to be visual and not the old time radio stuff. Yeah. And you know, you'll have to adapt. As if I stay in the business very long, I'll have to adapt and changing my style of broadcasting to fit that form. Yeah, and that's been the crazy thing with this is because, you know, we keep moving in that media thing of podcasting. We do podcasts or we do shows or we do this or do that. And in the Box, in all of its iteration, has 250,000 views. Did you know that? Like a quarter million views. Now, in the world of streamers, that may not sound like it much, but we here at Lebanon Now, we exist on an audience core of 36,000 people. So that's almost that's 3/4 of them watching it 10 times. Like, and it's going out of that, and it's going farther than that. And In the Box is going to continue. This is our plug. If you have somebody, when we're off air, I got like 3 or 4 ideas. We got some more things coming up. The last subject I wanted to talk to you about as we wrap up here is your family life, right? Because as much as I know about you, mentioned your wife quite a bit, but I've noticed when you were sheriff on ball games and stuff, you're kind of your standalone. Tell me about David Millsap the father and David Millsap the husband. Well, probably asking the wrong person. I would tell you I'm a great father and a terrific husband. You know, Tammy and I have been together since high school, and there's nobody that knows me better than what Tammy Millsap does. So I can't even tell a story that she wasn't there. I mean, we're together a lot, and we've been together since high school, and nobody knows me better than she does. She knows the weaknesses and strengths, and she knows that if I like something, I throw 110% in it. If I don't like it, for instance, I'm not mechanical. I don't like mechanical things. Thank goodness she likes to put things together, but I won't even try to learn. And so Tammy and I have been very devoted to each other. You know, we're like two peas in a pod in a lot of ways. We like the same kind of music. We like the same kind of. She loves sports. In fact, she might like sports better than I do. My son Jason is with the Highway Patrol, works in narcotics. My daughter Amanda is a teacher at Stoutland in special education. She kind of followed her mother's path when it came to a profession. They're totally different people in a lot of ways and totally alike in many ways. But you know, we're kind of, you know, boring and normal. I mean, there's not much to us. I mean, we're the family's big in sports. Tammy and I go to almost every game that one of our grandkids is involved in. We went to every game. There might have been 2 or 3 games in their lifetime where I wasn't at either Jason or Amanda's sporting event, or if, you know, our grandson Brody, which is the oldest grandson we had, I remember when he graduated from preschool. I bet there were 35 relatives there for his preschool graduation. I looked at Tammy and I said, what are we going to do if he actually ever does anything? I mean, it's not like he's graduating from Duke. Right, yeah. And but that family thing's been a really big, we're really tight. And you know, as a father, I think I was somewhat demanding, but you know, My son one time described, he got interviewed by the Highway Patrol, and they said, "Tell me about your dad." And he said, "Well, my dad is one of the best leaders I've ever been around." And said, "Give me something negative about your dad." He thinks he knows everything, even when he doesn't. And described his mother, says she's the hardest worker that I've ever met. So I think our kids drew their ethics and their work ethic. Again, it's kind of a Millsap tradition that you've got a job and you're going to do that job the right way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time coming and sitting down. I got one more question. Is your political career done? Are you done?
When I first left office, I told everybody that I would leave that open, and I've had some inquiries about why don't you run for this. Right now, I'm having a lot of fun doing the In the Box and some other stuff that I do for you, and the stuff at KTTK, and getting to do a little stuff for Jacket Nation and KFLW, and I'm coaching at Stoutland and the baseball team. And, I just don't see a place right now for politics. Now, I am elected as a member of the Republican Central Committee, and I'm the chairman of that committee, and so that keeps me involved in politics. But right now, I'd rather report about it, talk about it, than have to go out and run for office.
And that's what we're doing. Last little plug here is coming up. You just recorded the marker for it, and you were my first pick for that. With Lebanon Now and what we want to do, going back to the throwback of serving the community, that's different, right? It's different now because one of the things that I will tell you about trying to be a news type of agency, I don't want to use that word strongly because we're not, but type of agency, is it's so weird. Like back in the day, reporters in the paper picked what was news. It's opposite now, is that you get up in the morning, you look at Facebook, you see where the leads are, you see where it goes. When we report on city council, when we report on what's going on in the county commission, nobody cares. Like literally nobody cares until they buy a golf course, right? And as soon as they buy a golf course, which we reported that they were going to buy the golf course for weeks and nobody cared, right? As soon as it actually happens, they care. So when we sat down to figure out what to do for elections, there's twofold to this. One, we want people to get out and vote. We want to remind people. National politics is such just so crazy right now that last election we've seen a lot of people not vote. But we want to make sure people understand their voice and understand that they're voting. And as we exit here, because I've never asked you this before, but you seemed really interested in doing this. What is your views of doing the election coverage for Laclede County this year?
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun because I've always been interested in politics, and I read a lot, and I read a lot of political stuff, especially biographies of past presidents.
Yeah.
And reading John Adams, David McCullough's book on John Adams right now. I think it's going to be interesting in how we develop that. I would tell people, and I haven't told you this yet, it's kind of, this is a test right now.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to think you're going to tune into us and we're going to look like and sound like KY3's coverage or NBC's coverage or Fox News, it's not going to be that. We're going to be covering local events or local elections in such a way that kind of is reminiscent of what KLWT or KJL did back in the day. Yeah. And we've had that void where we've not had that for now for a couple of years. I think it's going to be an interesting test. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, I enjoy the political thing and discussing politics, but I think it's going to be a good product. It's not going to be, and I hate to say this, it's not going to be a finished product. I don't want people turning in and going, well, he didn't sound anything like Walter Cronkite.
Number one rule at Lebanon Now is you lower expectations.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to do that either. To be truthful, give us a cycle and we're going to get better.
Oh, no, and that's why I make the joke, and I always tell my wife, like, I don't understand why anybody watches anything we do, but they do. It is because we don't know what we're doing, right? We have an idea, and me as the producer, I go out, because Taylor Howe is going to join us.
Right.
And I love Taylor Howe because he's going to have that younger perspective. He's very political vocally as well, and coming in and having kind of that younger point of view and your point of view, and we're going to produce it up. So the plan is, like, on election night, my wife's going to be downstairs making on-time graphics. We're going to have somebody at the courthouse. I'll be producing. You and Taylor will be at the desk. And how that works, we don't know.
Yeah.
There's two reasons to tune in. One is to see the election results, and two, to see if we pull this off or not.
Right.
And I love the fact that we're all doing this together. And if we fail, we fail in front of everybody. But I don't think it's going to be a failure at all. I think, like you said, it's going to be a process that I think by the time we get to the November broadcast, we're going to have it down.
Yeah, and I think here's what I find interesting about it is that we had a meeting over at Taylor's business, funeral home and How, and Taylor and I are just sitting there talking. Now, I've known Taylor's dad as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
His mom was just a year behind me in high school, and so I've known them a long time. I don't know Taylor that well.
Yeah,
and so we're just sitting there talking. And it was such an easy conversation about politics. And, he's very well read in that area. He loves presidential history, which I do too. And his family's always been connected to local politics. Kenny Howe was big in the Ashcroft and Blunt campaigns. So he's grown up around that. So I think the combination of us two just talking local politics, I think people will find interesting. Maybe controversial, but I doubt it. I think it's going to be more about just we're having a conversation about local politics and what does this look like.
And the one thing that I walked away from and if anybody takes this as an insult, I'm sorry. But one thing I walked away from watching you and Taylor talk, because I just kind of sat over there in the chair and let you guys go because I wasn't sure how you guys would interact. I'm like, it's about time the grown-ups got to talk, because we look on social media. And especially in this political climate, everybody's name calling, everybody's doing whatever. The conversations you guys were having was actually discussion of the topics in a way that I think we're losing, because when we go out and we look at politics and we look at the current climate, if you say something, you're going to be attacked. That's just kind of, so the people that are logical and the people that are level-headed stopped talking. Right.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I tell everybody this, we in the political realm, we no longer have statesmen. Everybody's got to think they got to be in this camp and that camp. And I, grew up here watching people like John Russell, who was a true statesman, and the things that he was able to accomplish in the House of Representatives and in the General Assembly, and what he accomplished as state senator. And he knew how to be a statesman. And we don't have that anymore in many ways. And so I think that's one of the issues. And I'm going to tell you, I've said this in a couple of shows that we've had, including the one that we just did with Larry Winfrey, is I wish some people had taken a civics class. I listen to them talk about politics. I listen to them talk or read that or criticize this, and I'm thinking, you have no idea how this stuff works.
No, none at all. And that's one of the biggest things that I want, and I love having you and Taylor do, and we're going to express, is explaining how a lot of this work. Jeff Knight, Melissa Schmidt, we're working on the governor, we're working on a lot of people to come in, not necessarily as a political stance, but these are people that know how it works, right? And we want the viewers and we want people at home to understand more of how things work, other than, I can tell you from being a producer of a news-esque and likes, clicks, attention, that all drives, because take that and we sell it to sponsors, and that's the whole reason. So a lot of the networks like CNN, Fox, all of those know that. So they only go the sensational route. They only go what divides us, not what brings us together. And they absolutely do not educate us. And that's what I want this whole cycle to be. That's what I want this get out the vote thing to be, is us educating people. Democrat, Republican, independent, I'm not going to vote. Politics are boring. They're dumb. However you feel about it, it's still the system that we have. And if we ever want to change that system, we have to get involved in that system. Otherwise, we fall victim to that system. So that's what I'm hoping we accomplish through this.
And I think we will. And I think we've got to, when I talk about we're going to get better, I think we have a clear picture of how we want to proceed. I don't want people to get the idea that, I'm going to be over here at the board explaining the ups and downs of precinct voting and all that, and exit polls and all of that stuff. But it's not going to be that. It's going to be Taylor Howe and I talking about local issues. And when and I don't think we're going to have them in the box, but we're going to interview all the candidates, is to get their side of why they're running, and probably address a couple of major issues that may be facing the school board or facing, city council. So you'll know that this is where they stand on those particular areas, and I'm not going to debate them about that.
No.
I'm going to ask them questions about that, and then they can give their answer. And if they lead me down to a question, I'm not going to be afraid to ask that question either.
No. And we want people at home. We want the viewer to look at that and make an informed decision. Right? It's funny, as I have worked on some political campaigns as a marketer. It's amazing when you get to the backside of a campaign, some of the things that happen. That they line up to file, because if you go in and don't know them, most people will vote for the first person on the ticket. So they're trying to get votes that way. We're trying to get there's a million different ways every candidate tries to get votes. The reason I want them to come on Lebanon Now and be associated with this is information. I want any viable candidate that affects what we do in Laclede County to have an open invite to come sit down and talk to you and Taylor, me, whatever their schedule allows, so we can get that information to the public, because it is scary. The only thing that's more scary about not voting to me is people going in uninformed to vote and just guessing a problem into office.
Yeah, I don't like the idea when somebody they'll say, "Well, I voted no on that." Well, why'd you vote no?
Yeah.
Well, I always vote no.
Yeah.
Well, that's a problem.
Yes.
Know what the issues are, and that's hopefully we'll be able to do that, and I think we will do that.
Yeah.
But politics at the local level is a lot of fun. It's interesting, Lebanon, you heard me talk to Taylor about this. I know you're wanting to wrap this up, but
you're good.
Taylor, I told him, I said, Laclede County politics is different in a lot of places. We're pretty calm here. One, typically it's all Republicans running, but even though you may have competition in that, man, we're pretty benign, pretty vanilla compared to some of these other counties.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? We're okay with that.
No, because you look at, and we've got time. When you look at Camden County, if anybody in Camden County is listening, I'm sorry I'm using you as an example, but that's what you earned, is that the last couple election cycles have gotten pretty dirty, right, and just pretty bad. And we at Lebanon Now, we don't want to facilitate that, right? That's not what we're trying to do here. And I like the fact, and the only reason I decided to do this is because we're boring, right? And it's going to be a more informational thing than it is any sensational thing. We're not going to tolerate, candidates coming mudslinging another candidate. You're here to talk about your thing, and that's what we want to be. And I trust, and looking at the candidate roster for city council, and I trust we're going to have that.
I do too, and I tell people that are running for office as the chairman of the local party here committee, is that when they come to me about running for office, I tell them, we expect you to conduct yourself the right way. And I always tell them, when I ran for office in 2016, I never mentioned my opponent.
Yeah,
never talked about him.
No, and
people will try to bait you into that, and typically I would tell them, well, I worked with him in the 80s. We got along really well, and that's how you have to conduct an election in Laclede County if you want to be successful. If you think you're going to go mudsling and you're going to be successful here, bad news, because here's what you don't know, and I tell people this all the time. My wife Tammy's got, I think everybody in town's related to her. So you say something bad about me, it's going to be to a second or third cousin, and it's going to get back.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw that. We did see a little bit of that in the last sheriff's election that Matt Frederick was involved in, and somebody had made a comment to my sister-in-law that was totally out of line and totally wrong, and we dealt with that.
Yeah.
And so again, that's why we tell people in Laclede County, when you're running for office, that concentrate on what you can do, what you want to do, what you want to change, and don't even mention your opponent.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, we do have to wrap it up. David, thank you so much for the time you've invested in Lebanon Now, and just the time you've invested in your community, your family, your friends, your faith. The biggest compliment I can give you is that as like I said, when you came on to help in Lebanon Now, it was a big uptick in the credibility of what we do. And I just want to thank you for taking that chance on Lebanon Now, and continue to do what you do. I love bringing your perspective to the community, and I'm looking forward to having more of it.
Well, I appreciate this, and this is a lot of fun for me, and especially setting in the new studio.
Yeah, right?
It's so radio.
It is so radio. I got to brace this table a little better.
But, this is... I'm more comfortable like this than we did when we did it in the other studio. So this is really a neat addition, and I think this is going to take off. And again, the only thing missing is a turntable where I can play Wheelie and Waylon.
I have that. I have that, and it'll be hooked up next time you're here.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you.